The message browser is the most important tool for long-term usage in Health Connect. It is a godsend. I will say there's some vendor solutions that leverage less ideal searching methods for being able to find messages. Remember our 2 a.m. test? I wake John up at the middle of the night, something went wrong. He has to go resend all of the messages that happened over the last hour for a subset of patients or something like that. In some situations, for some other tools, you actually have to like search
Reload
through
files.
like log files.
So yeah.
Yeah.
In the example you're talking about, some systems will roll over their message files every day at midnight. New. It's like a new log file, right, of messages. So when someone says, "Oh, I need the last week of ADT," we're bringing up a new system and we need a backlog because they're coming in for appointments. Right? It's not unusual. They have to literally load 5 different files and search for the messages within those files that they need to extract to then send.
Needless to say, having an embedded database is awesome, and it makes searching a lot easier. So not even just searching the messages, but the visual trace, for those who are familiar with the tool, every single Health Connect customer has at least 15 visual trace tabs open at all times on their browser. That is something they're looking at day in and day out. It's the history of what happened to that message as it passed through the system. For most Health Connect interfaces, this is going to be a very wide trace, and it can be very long as well, depending on how many messages we're talking about.
Yeah. So if you look, there's 2 services, 2 processes, and 2 operations in this particular trace. Each one of these is a new message. So when we talked about separating messages and doing transformations, only if you change a message do you create a new message body getting stored in the system. So other than that, we use sort of a tag, a header, to say we're processing the same message body. And we might send it to 50 systems. And as long as we don't change the body, it's only going to stay in the database in that one format. Every change, you get a different message. So in this case, HL7 message comes in. This is a custom interface. This one's actually designed, and the reason I put this in is because we're talking about custom code and what people can do. This one's actually designed to turn off and on different components based on the message coming in. So it can literally read the message coming in and go, oh, I'm supposed to turn on this component. And it turns it on, processes messages, that turns itself off. So there's things you can do in custom code that are pretty cool. And you can do those all through this and watch the message trace occur. And actually, I think it says this one's queue alert, because this one we had 60 seconds of non-response. It's sitting on top of the queue for 60 seconds. The queue, a wait time, is one of the most important alerts you can use, because it tells you how long something's sitting on a queue waiting to get processed. And very commonly, you have systems that are going to send you 500 messages at a time. Like, they just batch them up and send them off. So if you do an alert based on the number of messages on the queue, it may not tell you anything about whether or not the system's actually performing well. So we tend to suggest using queue wait time if possible, and then there's other things you can do as well. But this is just a good example of being able to see the different messages come through. You can actually, the one that's highlighted is actually showing you what's within the message. But these are database entries. And they're either the same message body ID or a different one if it's been, generated as a new message. Sorry.
No. That was super good. Just finishing up on the searching, and then I want to go into that alert piece too. Resending messages happens all the time. Searching messages happens all the time. We use something called search tables to make those searches efficient. That happens all the time. So this concept of parsing through messages, resending them, that's something that an analyst is doing on a day-to-day basis, even after their interfaces have been fully migrated. But they do use it as a debugging tool. So this is just one thing to keep in mind, and then we'll go into the demo too. We separate out alerting and monitoring. We talked about the ops team having the big screen up with all the colors. Like, that is like passive monitoring. When that thing turns red, someone will see that visually and then they'll do something about it. But if everyone fell asleep, that's kind of a problem. If you're relying on someone to be watching a TV 24/7, it's not always the best strategy. So in addition to having monitoring tools that change colors, it's really important before any customer goes live that they have an alerting framework set up. Because if an interface goes down and nobody knows about it, what is it? If a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear, doesn't make a sound. It does make a sound and it's very loud. It sounds like an alarm. So one of the things that we ensure with our Health Connect customers is before they go live, they have alerting configuration set up so that they receive alerts in the event of a connection issue, a queue issue, so a buildup of a queue or a message sitting on a queue for too long.
Or a Randy issue, meaning he edited in production.
Oh, an inactivity issue. Maybe I've gone a certain amount of time without getting a message. That's a problem. Maybe I got back a negative acknowledgement from a downstream system because my message is formatted poorly. All of these things, now remember, we have FIFO, right? We cannot move on until this message is processed. So if I cannot process this message, what's happening? I am building up more and more messages behind that cannot process. So I need to get this one resolved so that everything can continue to funnel through. And so having targeted alerts being sent to the right people at the right time immediately is critical. And I think sometimes this is glossed over in the interface build process, but it's just as important, if not more, than actually building the interface.
Yeah, unfortunately, what happens is we go over the alerting very early in the process because we want people to start using it right away, and they're still learning how to build interfaces.
We have to do it twice.
And so you need to go back and do it again at the end, or you're going to wind up with a bunch of interfaces going down and no one knows.
Exactly. So on that front, we can talk a lot about monitoring. I'd really focus on alerting and what John's going to show. But alerts within Health Connect are just messages, which I never got your name, Sergey, which Sergey said earlier. They're just messages, so they can be routed and transformed just like an HL7 message. You can send an email, you can send a page, you can send a text, you can open a ticket in ServiceNow using a REST API, which ServiceNow supports. So there's a lot of different things that you can do when you receive an alert, treating it like a message. In addition to interface alerts, it's just as important to have system alerts. So things like, is my TLS certificate going to expire in 30 days? Am I over 90% utilization on my CPU? Am I about to run out of disk space in my disk volume? These are all things that we should know about in advance. And in addition to having monitoring on the OS level that's taking care of it, there are monitoring tools within Health Connect that can alert you of those things as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
I think you almost covered all of it.
Well, you're going to show something,
I
right?
know, yeah.
You have to wrap up in about 3 minutes.
Okay, so then I'm just going to do this real quick. So some of the monitored things that we're talking about, this is an example of a custom report that was created by one of our customers that has, them monitoring their system, the amount of messages going through, so on and so forth. But let's get into... I'm already here, I think. Yep. All right. So when I look at the alert router, so this is a very special component. If it says ens.alert, that's what's used for routing your alerts. It's specific. So whenever you set up a system component, service or any other item, and you say, alert on error, and you set one of these settings, it's looking for that ens.alert. So it's very specific. There's also a bad message handler I'm not going to go into, but basically think of it as messages that don't validate for whatever reason. So anyway, let's look at the ENS alert. Messages that come through. Let's see. We have one here. I'm just going to give you an idea. This is something that's very custom. And what this is that I'm tracking any changes made in the production or any changes made to code. So if someone were to move code like Jess did, she didn't move it here, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry.
I would have a full list of all the changes she made and who did it. The reason this is really important is because if you're on a big site and you have, 20 different analysts working on interfaces, and all of a sudden someone moves code, I've been told many, many times by some of our largest customers, they spend so much time trying to figure out who moved what and where it is, right? So this alerting mechanism is basically keeping track of any changes to production items, and I'll show you one. I'll do it right now. So if I come in here and I just change this pager alert, and I go into settings, and I'll just say, whoop, this, and I apply that change. Now I haven't started it. I haven't done anything different, but I have made a change in the code. So if I come up here to my change alert and just see if I have any new messages, because it's on a timer. Let's do a little refresh. It may take a minute. But the idea, and I'll show you one of the old ones. Basically, it comes in and says, in this alerts, the pager alert was edited by John Goodgame at this time. So it tells me what was changed. I also save before and after of those changes. So you can do, this is custom, but the point being that when you come in here and you set up your system and you're looking at the settings for alerts, and at the bottom here, we have things like log trace events, so on and so forth. But this alert on error is very important. So you want to check that off.
System default setting.
Yeah.
One, always. Always a system default setting.
And in here, this queue wait alert, I almost always want that on. Now, obviously, this is a demo system, so I don't always have it on. But the ability to create your own custom alerts, I have some that are on entire system queue total count, because a system having 500 messages on a queue is probably no big deal because it's a batch file or something like that. But if I have 40,000 messages sitting in separate queues, I know my system's not processing as fast as it should. So we have total queue counts. Those are custom things you can do. The point of this is that, as Jess said earlier, the alerts are just a message. So you can custom code them. You can create your own alerts, and you can develop the way that they look. And lots of our customers do this, or SEs do it with them, to make sure that you're monitoring your system the way it should be monitored. Sometimes it's custom. Sometimes you can just do it with what's already here. But large systems tend to want to know, if Randy came in and changed the production, I want to know that he changed it in case something happens. So that's pretty much it.
All right.